Hey guys, and welcome to Little Black Book 91 Coaching. Today we are talking to you guys about attachment styles. I'm excited because this is a long list of videos that I'm going to start doing. And this series is really a very helpful one to start saving you guys in your relationships and in your marriages. So listen, we don't want to waste much time. We want to get straight to it. We want to get right on the money talking about attachment styles. For those of you who don't know, attachment styles is a psychologist. Underneath was done by psychologist John Bowlby, who crafted this theory by watching young infants deal with their caretakers. Oftentimes, it was the mother, and what he noticed was that the emotional bond between a child and the carer fell into three categories. One was secure; the child was able to receive love, give love. The child fell into avoidant, which the child had no particular indifferent response to the parent, but was a child who seemingly had built up its own independence from being emotionally neglected, whether that was on purpose or by the way that the parent maybe dealt with the child's cries. And then there was obviously anxious preoccupied, where a child was seemingly anxious about the parent leaving and then would cling as soon as that carer came back in. So we're going to talk a little bit about how attachment styles plays a role in relationships and how it's going to save your relationship and save your marriage as well. So do me a massive, massive favor. Make sure you guys are liking, you're sharing, and you are subscribing. It's the first time I've actually done this solely on my channel, LBB 91 Coaching. I usually share it with Little Black Book, and I thought, listen, it's time to take a risk and put it solely on this channel because I'm fully much in believing in the work that we're about to start embarking on and start doing as well. Okay. Now, listen, I'm not going to do this alone. I've got actually a trusted helper. I've got a friend of mine who's going to help me very much through this particular process. Let me tell you who. My wonderful, fabulous, entertaining, yes, my PowerPoint with me. And I love a good PowerPoint. One thing you got to know about me, I love a good PowerPoint, okay? So we're gonna break attachment styles theory all the way down. You haven't missed anything yet, guys. If you're coming in and you're in the live chat, you literally have just arrived at the pinnacle of the start of the conversation. So don't worry, get yourself seated in, like the live, share it with somebody who needs to hear this as well, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And I appreciate all of you who are already in the room. Okay, now why did I say that attachment styles is something that can save your relationship or your marriage? How could I make such a bold, confident statement? Well, I've coached over 300 people in the last year past, and I've seen the growth and the transformation, the healing that has taken place for those people in their relationships. In fact, the other day, I literally had a couple reach out to me and tell me how much I've helped them in terms of their relationship and as well. So shout out to them. I won't blaze them out. When they're ready to talk, they'll talk. But why is attachment style so powerful? I'll tell you why. Because what it does is it explains the relationship with yourself. You see, marriages and relationships are no different. I don't need to solve your marital issues. I need to solve the individual's issue. When you are in a dating space, okay, when you're in a dating space, you yourself, when you are in a relationship, are relating to that person based upon what you've related to yourself first. I always say this: you are never abandoned by that person first. You are abandoned by you first, self abandonment, or you're abandoned by your parents, which led to self abandonment of your needs and wants, and fear in the way that you dealt with relationships that leads to an abandonment in that relationship. You were rejected by that particular person in a relationship, yes, but there was rejection first in your childhood, which then is often leading to rejection of self, of parts of yourself, that then lead to rejection and the fear of being rejected, making you be a people pleaser or you not being true to yourself in a relationship. Then there is an aspect when it comes to betrayal. Oftentimes we're afraid of people betraying us, but the reality of the situation is we were betrayed when we were a child, and we've also betrayed ourselves in cause of our wants and our needs and what we actually want in a relationship. And therefore, because of that not being true, we end up being betrayed in relationships by choosing people that are going to betray you because you're not being true to who you actually are. So, attachment styles really helps us to explain how you emotionally attach in a relationship and what bonds you create in those relationships. Are you somebody who is a very secure person? And a secure person, you know them, right? Sometimes they're labeled as boring. Sometimes they're labeled as very stable. And sometimes they're labeled as the people that, just seem to be very sturdy. And it's because they're able to give love and receive love. It's because they don't run to toxic tropes and stereotypes. They actually inquire before they make judgments. It's because they actually seek to have good, honest conversation rather than manipulating you and being passive aggressive. But then there are other people who fall into other categories. I myself am a dismissive avoidant, becoming more secure. And what is that? A dismissive avoidant is somebody who, first and foremost, creates distance when it comes to emotional intimacy. It becomes overwhelming to be overly emotional with people, right? And to form strong bonds on an emotional level. I need you to have independence because I like my independence. My greatest fear is you enmeshing me and collecting me and you overtaking my own individuality. So what do I do in relationships? I push people away, or I run away when you're doing too much, so it seems. And then we have anxious, preoccupied people, people who are always seeking to earn love, are afraid of abandonment. So they are always striving to show people that they are worthy of your love. Always on the move, always on the go, always trying to cling to that person in front of them because they're afraid of them being abandoned. And then we have fearful avoidance. A fourth one that was done by Mary Ainsworth. She was a psychologist who built upon the three that John Bowlby has done. And what she said about the fearful avoidance, if you know them, they're disorganized attachment or dysfunctional, they're labeled as. Fearful avoidance tend to oscillate between the two. They are hot and they are cold because they tend to oscillate between anxiousness and avoidance. They want love, yet they reject it because it's scary for them. When they receive that love, they're not sure if you're not going to betray them. In fact, they're always hyper vigilant, looking out for when you're going to do something that could hurt them. Or better yet, confirm their bias that they're not worthy of love, or that you're going to reject them at certain points. And so these things are individual relationships with ourselves before we talk about relationships with others. If you can solve the relationship dilemma in you, I promise you, you'll solve the relationship dilemma in yourself. So let's talk about it. Let's break it down. Let's get into it. Okay. So attachment styles. Let's get them. I'm gonna get friendly, wonderful PowerPoint. So attachment style theory, as I've explained already, is a psychological explanation for the emotional bonds and relationships between people. Okay. And it was a theory that was done by John Bowlby, and the distress produced by separation from the child, from their caregiver. And this is where we want to start from here. Actually, all attachment styles are dealing with anxiety. It's separation anxiety. How does that child respond to the separation anxiety? The secure child learns resilience and is able to rely on their parent caregiver. So if the caregiver leaves, yes, they may feel a little bit of distress, but they know the parent is coming back. And so they're able to reattach to that caregiver without there being an adverse reaction. Then you have anxious children. The parent leaves, there's separation, and there is anxiety that builds on a big level for the child. And so when the caregiver comes back, they cling to the caregiver. The avoidant has anxiety separation. So when a parent goes away, when a child comes back, the avoidant has an indifferent response. Why? Because they need to not feel any anxiety. They don't want to feel it. They don't want to feel like they're being emotionally drawn in that space because they know already that the parent or caregiver is unreliable in this particular space. And then there is a fearful avoidance who seemingly have no real response. It's random. It seems it is hot and it's cold. It's sometimes they're crying, sometimes they're okay. It depends on what's happening around them in the environment. They are born in chaos, and so it's very difficult to have a solution for them. So let's continue. So the four attachment styles, as I've already explained, are anxious, secure, dismissive, avoidant, and fearful avoidant. What you must understand is, again, we're dealing with anxiety and avoidance. So for the secure, there is low anxiety, low avoidance. When it comes to situations within a relationship, a secure person isn't trying to avoid things necessarily, and you'll find that they have less anxiety when they're dealing with certain emotional issues within the relationship, things like abandonment, rejection, or betrayal. Then there's anxious, preoccupied, all right, who are very high on the anxiety list, but then have very low avoidance. They're not running away from relationships, they're running to, okay, all right? They're not running away from you, they're running to you. And then you have dismissive avoidance, very much high on the avoidance, but very much low on the anxiety. So as soon as they feel any anxiety, what they're going to do is they're going to distance themselves and they're going to move away from you. And then there's fearful avoidance, who are high anxiety, high anxiousness. I mean, high anxiety, high avoidance. Okay, all right. So the four types of styles. Apologies about this. StreamYard want to take me out, but hey ho. Really, really quickly, this is just a little chart that I did about how they feel about themselves versus how they feel about others. What you must understand is a secure person has a positive image of himself and a positive image of others. Okay, anxious people have a negative image of themselves, but a positive view of others. Dismissive avoidants have a positive image of themselves, but then a negative image of others. And fearful avoidants have a negative image of others, a negative image of themselves. When I say negative image, what does that mean? I am talking about the trust that they have. When it comes to trusting themselves and trusting other people, are you somebody who says, you know what, I can't trust nobody? Then you probably are on that scale of dismissive avoidant or fearful avoidant. I can't trust anybody. Or maybe you're somebody who says, I'm too trustworthy. I trust everybody. Everybody's a good person. Then you're probably on the anxious scale. Now remember, the fearful avoidant, which I haven't expressed yet, is carrying both the anxious and also carrying the avoidant traits. So at points, they can be very trusting of people and very distrusting of themselves. Or they can be very distrusting of themselves and too trusting of others. They can oscillate between the two due to, again, their chaotic upbringing. And so they fluctuate on the spectrum, on a scale, depending on the environment and on the person. Because if they're dealing with somebody who is more dismissive, then they may oscillate towards the more anxious side. If they're dealing with somebody more anxious, they may oscillate more towards the avoidance side. Just depends who's in front of them. So, again, the secure attachment. Children who rely on their caregivers tend to feel distressed when separated and joyful upon reunion. While they may experience upset, the caregiver will come back when they are scared. Okay. Sorry, I went ahead of myself there. When they are scared, securely attached children are at ease asking their caregiver for reassurance. This is the most prevalent attachment style. So, what does that mean? Because this sounds very powerful, but what does it mean? What it means is this: let's say from an adult, when an adult is in a relationship, this adult is able to ask for reassurance without feeling embarrassed or feeling like they're weak. Have you ever been in a relationship where you're scared or afraid to really, ask for what you want? You're a bit afraid of being able to say what you need. You're like, oh, I want to say it, but you know, I don't want to say it. I'm scared. If I say it, then that means that I'm vulnerable, and then that for dismissives, they're like, well, I don't look weak, I don't look like a dickhead, so I'm not going to say I need reassurance because a dismissive avoidant believes in hyper independence. Then you got your fearful avoidants who don't want to say. Don't want to say they want reassurance, but then what they end up doing is they do want it. So what they do, they take it. When I say take it, what I mean by that is they find a way to passively aggressively, sometimes it looks like manipulation, get their reassurance from you. So they're going to test you. They're going to put you in awkward situations so that you can give them the reassurance, right? Because they don't know how to ask for it without feeling like they're feeling weak or doing too much. They feel like they're being too needy. And then you have your anxious people, right? Who may ask for reassurance, but they ask for it way too much. They asked for reassurance yesterday, they need reassurance today, and they need reassurance tomorrow, and they need reassurance next week. Okay. And no matter how much you seemingly reassure them, nothing seems to change. Okay. But secure people know that when they need it, they will ask for it. When they don't need it, they're able to be independent and move. Okay. Fearful avoidant children. These children exhibit a puzzling combination of behaviors appearing disorientated or confused. They might avoid or push away their parents. They might pull away or push. They might avoid or push away their parents. The absence of a consistent attachment pattern is likely connected with the unpredictable caregiver's behaviors. In these situations, parents can be perceived as both comforting and frightening, resulting in disorganized behavior. Now, the difference between a fearful avoidant and the secure person is really the upbringing. The secure individual child has received autonomy in the right way. They're allowed to be an individual and develop their individuality, but they're also allowed to be dependent on the parent. You know, some of us have gone on the internet and we've seen certain people talk about how they can borrow money from their parents, or their parents on their 16th bought them a car, or their parents have saved up money for them. And some of us are like, well, you know what? I mean, and when we start getting annoyed at some of these parents who have done these things for their children because you didn't grow up in that household, and more times it's because we grew up in a household which was either dismissive, or it was something that was a parent wasn't necessarily as caring, or even sometimes abusive. So we're used to a level of hyper independence. And so when you hear those parents that have loved on their children, have taken care of their children, you know, have set up funds for their children, have, you know, they show up to their events and they are supporting them, and it doesn't matter what happens, that parent seems to be there. A lot of us haven't experienced that. Secure households experience that, but with the fearful avoidant, they don't experience that. What they experience is the abusive household. And abusive doesn't have to be necessarily physical. It can be verbal, the verbal accostings. They can be a parent who is angry one day and then is loving the next. There can be a household where you have a father who's viciously violent in his words and his anger, explosion of anger, and a mother who shows care and love. And yet, because the child sees the fear of the mother of the father, or the child feels a fear towards the father too, you can develop this fearful avoidant attachment. What, in essence, the child doesn't know how to handle the parent. The parent is inconsistent. Therefore, the child has no way of predicting how to behave, because there is an inconsistency and unpredictability of that parent. For instance, if you grew up in a household where there was a drunken parent, or if you grew up in a household where there was an addiction to the parents, so if they were on drugs or they were on some level of something that they were constantly being driven by, that can also play effect, right? And that can also, you know, really contribute towards that chaotic environment that the child grows in. Okay. um you know, so yes. Oh, Akila, I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. I will read out these messages after as well, guys, so keep sending the messages in. I will read those and I'll definitely talk about it. Then we have the dismissive avoidant children. Children characterized by avoidant attachment generally avoid their parents or caregivers. I can tell you this now, this is me. Okay, this is me right now. I'm avoiding them. So generally avoid their parent or caregivers, not demonstrating a preference for one or for one over the other. This attachment style may be the result of neglectful or abusive caregiving. When the children are punished for relying on caregivers, they often come to avoid seeking assistance in future. Now, this is really interesting because, like I said, some of us, I think a lot of us grew up in these kind of households where the punishment for asking for help. I remember I've told you the story when I came back from Ghana last year when I was doing my series on going to therapy. That I remember a particular significant situation where I asked my dad to help me with the homework, and he beat me instead of just helping me with the homework. I realized from that day onwards, I'm never asking you for help. I'm never asking you to help me with my homework. I'm never asking you to, or bring in anything to you that I need your help. I'm not going to put my dependence on you. Why? Because I was punished for being dependent. So I realized, do not be dependent on them. You can only depend on yourself. Now imagine what happens to a child who does that. They become hyper independent, very strong in their own opinion, but then they suffer in the areas of working with others and being able to accept other people's truth and other people's help as well. So you don't have to grow up in a household where necessarily you're necessarily abused, but or even necessarily neglected in a how would I say this, in a way that we can traditionally think. But just little moments like that for a child can change the trajectory of how they attach in relationships. If you were punished for attaching to a parent, you probably have developed this avoidant trait as well. Okay. Emotional neglect does not have to be purposeful, meaning the parent doesn't have to be trying to neglect you. It can be a case of the parent was working way too much, or it could be the parent shut you down in your expression. You ever been a child that tried to, tell your parent a story? You went to school, you came back from school, you told your parent a story, and they just dismissed you, had no time for you. That can be emotional neglect, right? Because a child needed the parent at that time and then was told to go and do one. So to say, right? Now you can see how these things are going to start to shape up in a relationship in the future, because all you need to do is be in an adult relationship and the person repeats the pattern that they saw as a child, and they will go straight back to this training. What this is training. So when we're talking about attachment styles, this is your training. And what a child does, the Bible says, train a child in the way to go, he will or they will not depart from it. So when I'm saying about solving your marriage or your relationship, the patterns that are existing in your marriage or your relationships are going to match what you've probably seen in your childhood. And so when you are getting triggered, you need to be aware of what patterns coming your way that you are responding to. Then we can begin to make changes. Awareness first, before then we can start making some changes about our behavior. And when you want to change the other person, you must change you. You cannot change them. You can only change you. But when you change you, they are forced to respond to the change. Okay? All right. The anxious attachment one. Children with an anxious attachment style typically exhibit behaviors that reflect a deep need for closeness and reassurance, along with a fear of abandonment or rejection. This attachment style often develops when a child experiences inconsistent or unpredictable responses from their primary caregiver. Sometimes the caregiver is attentive and nurturing, while other times they may be distant, neglectful, or unavailable. As a result, children with an anxious attachment style may develop insecurity in relationships and heightened emotional responses. Now, something I want to go back slightly to fearful avoidance. I do apologize. I love things come to my head as I talk. The fearful avoidant will carry both the anxious and avoidant traits. And one of the things about fearful avoidance is that they have the fear of abandonment, like the anxious person, and also that they can grow up in households where the parent actually did abandon them as well. Now, for the anxious person, the caregiver doesn't necessarily have to abandon the child. The caregiver could be working way too much and never really attaching and focusing on that child. The caregiver can be someone who is also a helicopter father or mother who is just so hell bent on determining how that child goes, where they go, what they do, how they do it, that the child now becomes anxious because at any given point, the parent's going to be on their neck trying to tell them how to do something and why to do something, right? So this is really important. So this is really, really important. This is an aspect of relationships that are key. So the child grows up in a household where there may be too much hands on deck, right? But the fear is they need to develop closeness and reassurance along with a fear of abandonment or rejection. Okay, so the unpredictable, inconsistent behaviors of the parent are going to create this. Like when children grow up in households that can be, where the parent is just highly strung, like those sports mothers and fathers, that are consistently trying to get their children to be a star and be this, and then you see that these children have anxiety attacks. These children break down. Why? Because consistently they're being pushed, not cared about, being pushed, and it's seemingly the parent is someone who is doing too much. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. So we're going to talk about some of the behaviors that exist within the attachment styles, and I'll probably add a few more as well. On the left hand side is the good ones, and the left hand side is the negative aspects of the relationship as well. Let me just quickly turn this up. Okay, so fearful avoidance in relationships can be great listeners. They want deep connections. They're very empathetic, and they look to serve. Fearful avoidants are carrying both the anxious and avoidant traits. And what tends to happen is fearful avoidants love to be someone who hears and understands other people, because one of the biggest things that they were robbed of was being understood. Okay. And so that's where they have a tie in with dismissive avoidance. They want deep connections and deep conversations. They, like I said, they want to know the why. Okay. Okay. They want to know the why. Why is this? Why is that? But they also want deep connections where they're talking on a level that isn't surface. They like to have conversations which really challenge their mind and challenge perceptions. They like the conversations that really tap into the brain and really get them to think, oh, okay, this is this and this is that. Okay, I see it. In fact, I think fearful avoidance are really, especially those who are high functioning, fearful avoidance are very career can be very career driven and very astute and very good at their job because of their ability to also drive home their ideas, their ability to really concentrate on this aspect, because careers make sense but not relationships, right? So you can find that they can be very, very good at their career, but not necessarily as good when it comes to relationships. There seems to be more fear around that aspect. They can be very empathetic and look to serve. What I found with fearful avoidance after coaching them is that they are very much a people. Like they want to be around people. They want to. They have friendships where sometimes they are the reason why that friendship exists. They have very much close ties to the anxious people too, right? So if you're a fearful avoidant, you've got two spectrums. Either you're the reason why your friendships exist, or you are the outside voice of your friendship. Either one. You either oscillate being the person who's Spider-Man and has got webs in everybody to make sure everyone stays together, and you are the contributing factor, or you are outside of the group, and maybe you bring the fun, maybe you bring the energy, maybe you bring the randomness, the unpredictability. You're that one friend that they can count on to do something different, right? But you're not always seen and you're not always heard. You're on the outskirts, right? Depending on what side you follow more, whether you're more anxious or whether you're more avoidant in that space. Okay. Now, some of the other behaviors is that you blow hot and cold as a fearful avoidant, meaning you are sometimes really clingy and sometimes you are very avoidant. And you are oftentimes overwhelmed by your emotions. You have several conflicting emotions, and that can be very difficult at the time because it feels like you're going crazy. It feels like no one's going to really understand this because you're 1 minute good, the next minute you're bad, the next minute you're happy, the next minute you're kind of sad. And those swirling of feelings can make you feel unregulated and unstable. Okay. And then there is a hypervigilance for betrayal, rejection, and abandonment. So because you've experienced these things as a child, your eye is keen. And actually, sometimes it's too keen. So keen that you are trying to prove the point that you will be betrayed, you will be rejected, and you will be abandoned. And because of that focus, what tends to happen is you end up choosing people who actually prove your very much point, your confirmational bias. And it's also because fearful avoidants look at danger very differently. The way that they look at danger is that they've already been in danger. They've already been in environments where they've already been in environments where they have they've already been in environments where there's been chaos. So actually dating somebody who's chaotic isn't a far-fetched idea. In fact, and I'll say this in a second or two for you guys, they struggle with boundaries. So one of the things that I've heard from fearful avoidance, and if you're fearful avoidant, type it in the chat for me right now. I call it the voice from the deep. And it's after I've coached a few fearful avoidants and I've witnessed it myself, especially for those people who have actually been abused physically, sexually. If you've been abused in that particular way, there is something I've heard that I put it this way: it's called the voice from the deep. Meaning, there are situations where someone will say they want you to do something, and you don't want to do it, but you hear this voice from the deep that pushes you towards the danger. It's like, I know I shouldn't go, but something pushes me towards the danger. Like, let's say, for instance, let's say a man likes you, and then and he says, "Come round my house," and you know that you shouldn't go because like you just don't want to go, but it's like something's compelling you to go. And so I've heard a lot of that from Fearful of Voice. Like, there's a voice from the deep. Someone says, "My little demon." Yes, it is because of the abuse that the person has suffered and the chaos that they grew up around. There is always this little inkling to go into more chaosness. And because they were never able to say no as a child, their environment never allowed them to say no. The boundaries are very weak. So they find themselves saying yes when they really mean no. They find themselves going to places that they don't want to go, but they end up going. They end up seeing fire, not running away from it, but going towards it. Right? And it's because they don't know, or they don't know the truth, as in that it is their truth, and they know it's their truth, that they can say no. They're allowed to leave it alone. They're allowed to go elsewhere. They're allowed to do what they want to do. But because of the fear of of retribution, punishment, because it's what they experience, they don't want to say no. Right? So they struggle with those boundaries, and it's a massive thing. Okay? The massive thing. Because again, they don't feel like they can say no. I love that point. Or saying yes while constantly looking for an exit. I have hoped to wake up sick. I hear it. I hear it. Yeah, sometimes you say yes to things that you don't want to say yes to, but you hope maybe it will cancel. Maybe it will, maybe something will go wrong and you won't. You sometimes say yes to things that you really you felt like you couldn't say no to, and you don't want to let somebody down. That's another thing as well about fearful avoidance. They will say yes to things that they don't want to say yes to because they don't want to let people down. They don't want to seem like the bad person. They don't want to be made to feel bad. They don't want to feel unlovable. They don't want to feel like they are not being a part of the group. And so sometimes they're just saying yes, and it's not what they really feel. So that's a major thing as well. Okay, some of the behaviors. Okay, another one: anxious attachments and their behaviors. So the anxious people, they can be great connectors of friends and people. Anxious people, because they're afraid of being abandoned, they are doing the most. Okay, and it's a good thing. There's a part of it that's a good thing. There's actually a good thing that's really positive, which is if you have an anxious person in your friendship group, they are more than likely the people that are, creating the plans, saying, like, if you're going to go on holiday, it's probably the anxious person that is organizing it all, because they don't want it to fail. They don't want it to fall flat. They don't want it to be wasted. We are going on holiday. That person is calling everybody. That person is checking up on everybody. That person is texting everybody. And on the day of going on holiday, that person's like, hey, have you got your passport? Have you got this? Have you got that? They write a checklist. Anxious people, they are often the connectors of their friendships. Have an anxious person in your group, because they go and sort everybody else out. You know what I mean? Okay. And again, coming to number two, they're oftentimes very much planners. So you will see in relationships as well that women tend to take on a more anxious attachment in relationships. Not all, but a lot of women do, and a lot of men take a more dismissive approach. Right. In fact, even the book "Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus," I started seeing those things. I was like, wait, a lot of the things he's talking about are actually anxious and avoidant attachment traits. Women oftentimes take on a more anxious trait because they're afraid of being abandoned. So you will see women, scheduling, doing the household chores. She tries to balance a million things on her head, and tries to keep a balance of it all because she feels like she must earn her love. But we'll come there in a second. Anxious people tend to be very empathetic. They try to understand your feelings, really getting under a scope of who you are and really understanding where you're coming from. The other thing is, again, they look to serve. Again, this is very much linked to fearful avoidance, as I said before, because they carry the same kind of traits. Okay. So anxious people will look to serve, look to help, look to be of, it looked to be of great help to people. You know what I mean? Like if you got that person, they will often try to anticipate your needs and anticipate what you actually want and what you may in future need from them. So that's another thing. Now, the other side of things when it comes to anxious people is that they are taking on other people's emotions as their own. Okay? All right? Anxious people. Okay? Anxious people, okay, tend to try to be in a space where they try to be in a space where they are understanding people's emotions to a degree which is detrimental to them. Okay, they do this to a detriment to themselves. What does that mean? It means that when they get into relationships, let's say for instance, I'm feeling hurt. The anxious person will identify with my hurt, but then take it on as their own. And the reason why they're doing that is because they're afraid of being abandoned. So they abandon their own emotions, abandon their own needs, abandon their own wants. Okay, all right. And what ends up happening is that they will end up abandoning themselves just to make sure that you're comfortable. And this is actually what it's so crazy. This is actually what women do in general. I don't know if anyone's clocked this. Women are very, how do I say this? Are very open to accommodating men. Of course, they live in a world where men dominate, so it's actually natural, right? But if you notice this, one of the beautiful things is that women are very accommodating. The negative side of that is when you're too accommodating to a point where you release your own wants and your needs. If we're talking relationships, this actually destroys the polarity between men and women. Men love women with good boundaries. Men love women who know what they want. Why? Because they're not having to figure out what you actually want. Okay, so this is really important. Men want women who have good boundaries and know what they want and can be direct. The thing with anxious people is they almost want to live in your skin, and then they start taking on what you want and need, not what they want. You ever dated somebody and they're like, they've forgotten who they are, forgotten what they like, and it's like, oh, you like chocolate? They like chocolate. You like the sky blue, they like the sky blue. You like lights on. Now suddenly they like lights on. Now I'm not saying that you can't grow and become more like of each other. What I'm saying is they lose the boundary between themselves and you. Okay? All right. Yes, David bent over backwards with King Saul. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Um, Another thing is they're ready to respond to changes without thinking deeply. If you're an anxious person or a fearful avoidant, because they're both on the same thing, what you're going to find is they are going to change, right? Thank you, Akira. Is a measurement, yes. They're going to change without really considering the ramifications or the depth of what's needed to change. Let me give you an example. Let's say my routine has changed, and I said you got to get up at 6 a.m. The anxious person will be like, okay, I usually wake up at 8 a.m. But then, okay, let's just wait. Okay, I'll change it. 6 a.m. I wake up. Without really thinking about it, without really going into the depths of understanding, hold on a minute, I need to think, can I do 6 a.m.? Because, actually I have to think about getting the kids up, or I have to think about going to school. I have to think about my job. Instead of thinking about their own wants and needs, they will literally change to fit around you. That's where, especially if you get anxious men, I call them when men are in their feminine and traits, women start noticing that a man starts doing whatever the woman tells her. They often cause women to feel a sense of angst because why do you not have no backbone? Why do you have no boundaries? Right? I call it the reverse polarity. But when it comes to relationships, this aspect of responding to changes without fully understanding what you're doing is detrimental to you. And it's detrimental to the relationship long term, because if I say I need you to wake up at 6 a.m. now, and you tell me, okay, yeah, okay, fine, yeah. I don't know that you don't like waking up at 6 a.m. I don't know that you weren't comfortable with that. I don't know that you had a problem with it. And then what happens is later on down the line, now you're stressed. And now you're talking about how, I do this, I do that, I do this for you, I do this for you, I do this for you. And I'm like, I never asked you. You never told me that was an issue. When I asked you, you said, yeah. You never told me it was an issue. How was I supposed to know? And it's because the anxious person takes on changes without really understanding where they're coming from. Number three is that they have hypervigilance in They have hypervigilance in abandonment and rejection. So the anxious person is very hypersensitive. The moment that they sense you pulling away, the moment they sense you kind of creating any distance, the moment they see you being an individual and needing time by yourself, they are about to launch their anxiety attack right on you. You're not about to go anywhere. They're about to be activated, and they're going to, now I need reassurance. Now I need to know that you love me. Now I need you to prove that you care about me. Now I need to know that you actually want me and desire me. I don't feel it. I don't feel it. I don't feel it. Reassure me, please. Texting you 5 or 6, 7, 8 times in a row because you haven't responded. This kind of activation by anxious people, because of they're afraid of being abandoned or rejected, initiates this fear in them. And so they're actually always looking out for any behavior. So even if you were generally, let's say for instance, you guys were going to go dinner, okay? And you said you want to go dinner, and then they said to you, oh, you said, oh, I've got to change plans. Dinner, I want to take you out on a dinner, but I've got to go to a work meeting. It's sudden. I apologize. We can do this maybe later on in the week, and we'll go dinner. The anxious person goes, what do you mean? What's going on? Again, they're going to probably say, okay, but now their brain is thinking, what do you mean you got to go to work meeting? Work meeting on a Monday? You've never gone work meeting on a Monday. What? And we're not going to dinner anymore? Their mind starts to spiral, and now they're looking for the abandonment. Then they're going to start going back over passing. They did this, and this. Oh, they're trying to abandon me. Oh, and it's not like they're thinking that they're going to abandon me. It just feels like something's changed, and they're spiraling. Okay, which leads to the clinginess. You know what I'm saying to you? Which leads to the clinginess. All right, as well. All right, cool. Dismissive avoidance. All right, very important. Dismissive avoidance. So, as we described, they can be very ambitious and driven at dismissive avoidance because they are they're self-reliant and hyper independent, and so they are always trying to do things on their own. So they have a great drive to accomplish and achieve things. So you can probably see that best in myself. As you notice, whilst I do work with people, I like to work by myself. It's why I don't like a team. It's why I like doing things by myself. It's why I like being self-driven. I'm very hyper-independent in some respect. And that is a great thing because it creates this ambition and this drive, but there is a negative side to that, and I'll talk about that in a second. They can be great mavericks and individualists. I remember I worked in a bank for a little while, and I turned up to that meeting in a blue suit, okay? All right, I turned up in a blue suit and yellow socks. And when I turned up to that interview, the person, the person who was interviewing me saw the yellow socks and said, wow, you're really brave, aren't you? I said, hey, I like to make an impact. You know what I'm saying to you? I like my style and I like to do my own thing. He said to me, that's the first time I ever heard the word maverick. I had never heard it before. He said, you're a maverick. You just want to, and I said, I think I am. Yeah, I guess I don't know what the heck he was talking about. I said, yeah, I just think I want to get that job. But when I went to research it, yes, dismissive avoidance tend to be mavericks. They tend to want to be solo. They tend to want to achieve things on their own. They tend to be people that are, you see them because they are stars in their own right, but they don't play well with others. Do you get what I'm saying to you? Like they do crazy things. Let's leave it at that. They can be great listeners. So they can be great listeners to a degree. Here's the degree. Don't keep bringing me the same issue when I've given you an answer. Okay? Dismissive avoidance can be great listeners because they will never listen to themselves. So they actually can play a very great role where they are what we call the confidant. They are the vault of secrets. Okay? Dismissive avoidant. If you have a dismissive avoidant friend, you know them. Okay, all right. You know them. You know how you know them? Because they are a vault of secrets. They're the friend that everybody goes to and says, you know what, you're just so strong. You help everybody, but then doesn't ask for any help. They suffer in silence and they're everybody else's confidant. You know who they are in your friendship group. You know who they are. Okay, all right. You go to them and you tell them secrets and it never leaves. You know what I'm saying to you? It never leaves. Okay, the vault of secrets, I call them. All right. And they are good problem solvers. Because they are hyper independent, they've had to solve issues from a child. This is why dismissive avoidance and fearful avoidance are quite similar. Because they've had to problem solve from a very young age, they problem solve quite well. The difference between dismissive avoidance and fearful avoidance is oftentimes the fearful avoidant doesn't trust their own voice, whereas a dismissive avoidant will bulldoze. Okay, you'll bulldoze. Okay, all right, you'll bulldoze. So that can happen as well. All right. La said, pretty sure I never used to be a dismissive avoidant, but I fear it turned me into one. What can happen? Also, what I've heard is that fearful avoidance can, because you are healing. If you've begun healing your fearful avoidance, right, you can actually fall more into a dismissive side before you get to your full healing. So if you are somebody who is a fearful avoidant, you may have both the anxious and avoidant traits. And what can happen is as you're healing, you may lean more towards your avoidant side because you're now starting to learn how to develop your voice and you're learning how to be more independent because a fearful avoidant can be very codependent. So one of the interesting things I've kind of researched is that the fearful avoidant will, as they're healing and become better and stronger, they go more towards the dismissive side. And they're not trying to do it on purpose. Is that they're realizing and they're understanding they've now got a voice. But in that side, because there is no balance, because again, when you're healing, you tend to go to an extreme before you come back to balance. So as you heal, you may go towards a more dismissive aspect. Life may come at you a certain way, and you will lean more into that dismissive side because you've learned that I need to depend on me. I need to have my own voice. I need to be strong. I need to be independent and stop being codependent before you come to a place of balance. So yes, that may be a case of you. So as you do more healing, you may find yourself coming to a more balanced possession and coming away from the dismissive avoidant aspect as well. Okay. Okay, so going back to dismissive avoidance, that good problem solving. So if you're a friend of a dismissive avoidant, they're going to give you good advice, okay? But don't let them give you advice 2, 3, 4, 5 times because they don't want to do it, okay? All right, get someone else to do it. If you're dealing with someone who's dismissive avoidant, if they give you a solution and you don't listen, oh, you come a second time, they're now fed up. That conversation is going to be short because I done told you the first time you didn't want to listen. We're now on a second time. You think you're going to waste my time? And the reason why that happens is because a dismissive avoidant sees people not taking ownership of their situation and wanting to depend too much on others like themselves. So they see that as a weakness. Why are you dependent on me when you already know the answer? I don't get to depend on you and other people when I know the answer. So why is it that you're coming to me? I've answered you. I've given you a solution to a problem, and then you go and do something else, and then come back to me. Well, then what? You're wasting my time. And so the dismissive avoidant doesn't realize that relationships are emotional connections, and therefore, in emotional connections, sometimes people do dumb things 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times and come back to you and still build a friendship. The dismissive avoidant doesn't necessarily understand that particular aspect because, again, for them, it's like I've told you, then let me tell you twice. Okay. And then what they don't realize is they end up doing what their parents did to them, which is start emotionally neglecting people. But we'll talk about it in a second. Okay. So one of the negative aspects of dismissive avoidance is the struggle. And I mean the struggle to ask for help. Okay. All right. Dismissive avoidance struggle in this area because why, if I asked you, I'm losing my independence. If you come and help, can I tell you no without being offended? Oh, can I tell you to stop here without you manipulate me, make me feel bad? Okay. Dismissive avoidance will struggle in this area because when they ask for help, they want to they feel like they're not competent. So if I don't want to ask, you know. Number two, they can feel overwhelmed by intense emotions of others. So if you're too emotional for them, if you're up and down, you know, sometimes it's even the person who's too excited, they're like, you're annoying. The person who's too sad, you're annoying. The person who is too angry, you're annoying. If you're too much of anything, you're annoying to dismissive avoidance. It's the extreme of anything. They don't like it. When it's too much of something, it's annoying, right? Like, so it's not that they're haters. It's the fact that they want an equilibrium and they don't enjoy being too emotional. And when I say emotional, living in emotions too much because they can't contain it, because they never were allowed to express themselves freely as children. So therefore, for instance, let me give you an example. You can't stay happy for too long. You know why? Because life happens and something bad will come along and then you're not happy again. So I can't rely on the emotion of happiness. So what happens? They go to a very neutral state. This is something I learned as well, which is really interesting. It's like, okay, something good happens in your life, and you're immediately like, okay, it's good, it's happened, but we need to make contingencies immediately. Because if something goes wrong, I need to make sure I've got to make sure that I've got contingencies, backup plans. Because happiness doesn't last. I've known that for life. So what ends up happening is they can never live in happiness for very long. They can't live in sadness for too long. They can't live in anger for too long because it's like, oh no, things got to get done, which goes back to the problem solving. Okay. Number 3, feelings of rejection or pain make them avoid or drift. So when a dismissive avoidant person starts to anticipate or project that there might be rejection coming, they immediately start to detach, right? Or when they feel like they're about to be enmeshed, or they feel like the person coming in is going to try and overtake them. And again, because again, dismissive avoidants do not have very good, okay, all right, Mimi, I hear you. They don't have very good, they don't have very good uh, boundaries. So dismissive avoidant people think they have good boundaries. They don't. Their boundaries exist in them being avoidant. So they have thick boundaries, but the thick boundaries are not good because you need to have a balance. You need to be a gate. You need to be open and to be able to come and go. Having too much thick boundaries leads to more trouble, right? So a dismissive avoidant will be like, no, 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 no. And it looks like they're inflexible. And it looks like, oh, they got great boundaries. They haven't. They don't know balance. And so they think they think, oh, look, I've got boundaries. No, you ain't. I mean, you have, but they're very thick and they're very inflexible. Like once I get into dig my heels in, I'm in. You know, like if something happens, I'm out. Or I'm the other way. If you start pushing me, I'm going to dig my heels in. You start telling me what to do, my heels are digging. I'm going to create a China wall. Like you ain't going to push me. And there are other situations where, let's say, for instance, very similar to fearful avoidance, let's say somebody asks you to do them a favor, but you don't really want to do it, right? You may go, all right, cool. But then you're like, actually, you start thinking about it. No, I don't really want to do it. And then what ends up happening is instead of just telling them you don't want to do it, what do? You start avoiding them. Yeah, you start avoiding them. Or you know that person that calls you that, do you know what, too much energy, they got too much energy and they feel like they're draining you, okay? What do? You start avoiding their calls. Why? Because you're not really being honest. Instead of letting them know that actually, hey, the conversation we're having, I'm pouring a lot into you, or you're pouring a lot into me in terms of your information. I'm drained. I don't feel like this relationship is mutual. I don't feel like we're on equal footing here. I'm always helping you, but you don't help me. The thing is, the dismissive avoidant hasn't let the other person know that they want the help. Because again, the dismissive avoidance fear is that if they ask for help, they look weak. But they want the person to almost anticipate. Okay? So in that space, they are going to drift rather than dealing with the actual situation. Number 4, they like their alone time and process events and emotions alone. Now, this is actually a really good thing, right? But it's also bad. And I'll tell you why it's good and positive and negative. The positive is that when it comes to being alone and processing the events and emotions alone, they're able to deal with the aspect of very difficult situations by themselves. They don't need to go to anybody else. They don't need to draw anybody else in. They don't need to have a sub story. And, they don't want anyone feeling sorry for themselves. But the negative aspect of this is that we as in relationships need to co-regulate. Okay? So when you're in a relationship, when I have a problem, I can come to you and say, hey, Akila, I've got a problem. I've got this issue I'm dealing with. And then you can be like, hey, babe, listen, I've got you. Like, what's up? Talk to me. Let me hear what you got to say. And then I share it and I can feel better. But as a dismissive avoidant, the thought of sharing burdens, the thought of sharing problems, the thought of sharing the pain, it is not something that comes naturally. Therefore, we won't co-regulate. We try to do it on ourselves and figure it out by ourselves. We're afraid we'll be judged for asking for help. So we're not going to ask for help. I ain't going to do it. I ain't going to do it. No, 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 no. We ain't going to do that. We ain't going to do that. We ain't going to ask for help. We need to get on with the situation. Okay? We need to get on with the situation. So, yes, you will notice that with dismissive avoidance as well. Okay? Now, secure people. This is where we're going to end it on the last few minutes. We're going to end it on secure people because this is where we all want to be. We want to be secure. Okay. All right. Now, secure people are not perfect, but they have something that we all want: security, emotional security. Okay. So, on the left hand side, like I said again before, is all about the positive traits. So, why is there a negative side of things when it comes to secure people? I will explain to you in a second. So, the very first thing you need to understand is that secure people communicate to understand. Okay. If you met somebody who's secure, when they are conversing with you, when something goes wrong emotionally or within the relationship, they're not quick to jump to conclusions. The other three, anxious, dismissive, fearful avoidance, have already jumped to a conclusion that aligns with their core wounds. What are those? Abandonment, rejection, and betrayal. And so the secure attachment person doesn't necessarily have those intensity of wounds. So they're not jumping to conclusions. They are actually trying to find out what is happening. So you've heard me say this term before: be in a space of inquiry before judgment, because judgment normally leads to an action that doesn't allow for the wholeness of a situation to come to fruition first. And a secure person understands that I need to inquire before I judge. Number two, a secure person is emotionally resilient and secure. When stress hits, they don't fall into anxiety, the anxious, the dismissive, or the fearful avoidant. They don't fall into those places. Why? Because they have a level of resilience when it comes to stress and tolerance. So when they're dealing with stressful situations, they fall back on their training. They fall back on the fact that they're allowed to be autonomous. They fall back on the part they're allowed to co-regulate. They fall back on the fact that they can talk about their issues. They fall back onto the part that they can actually solve the issue by themselves if they need to as well. They choose the right resource or tool for the situation. Okay, and the stress doesn't create an anxiety that is overwhelming. Okay, they are acknowledging of their emotions in times of distress. So when situations are not great, when they're finding themselves in a particular place and they recognize that there's things that are creating turmoil, what you realize is they actually acknowledge that their emotions are having their emotions are flowing right now, and they try to identify what emotions are playing right now and why. Whereas the other attachments, you notice that they just kind of work from that emotion. They don't really recognize their emotion. They just be led by the emotion. Whereas the secure person goes, okay, I'm angry right now. Now I want to cuss you out, but I'm angry. So I need to chill, give myself some time, cool down, and then come back to this conversation because I am feeling what I'm feeling. I am feeling what I'm feeling. They allow themselves to feel, and they recognize their emotions, because emotions are like a river that flows. If you stop the river, you're going to have a backlog, and the river is going to cause you to have a place where you're going to see the water begin to build up, and eventually it will break the dam, and you'll have an all-out breakout. What you need to do is allow emotions to flow. If you're angry, be angry. Don't stop it. When the other attachments try to stop their anger. And the reason why is because they have a bad relationship with anger. Fearful avoidance saw people being angry especially their parents, in the incorrect way. They were violent with their words. They were violent in their behavior. There was sexual deviance, all this kind of stuff. And so their anger they're afraid of their anger, because if they get angry, they don't know what they could do. There could be rage, right? Then there's dismissive avoidance who they pretend as if they're not even angry. I don't get angry. Yeah, I don't do anger. Tim from Love is Blind, I don't get angry. Yet it's seething underneath the skin. Yet a little infringement is ready to blow the gasket. Why? Because he doesn't want to honor, nor does he want to acknowledge he has anger, like every other human being does. Then the anxious person doesn't want to be angry because they're afraid of being abandoned. So they don't want to, they want to deal with their anger. Oh, I'm not going to be angry. I'm not angry. No, no, no. Why? No, because they're afraid if they show anger, you will abandon them. But the emotions are messages. You have to understand your emotions are like messages. Therefore, when emotions flow, you must read the message. Open the message. Why are you ignoring the messages? Do you know my Yahoo account has 12.3K messages. I hate that account. I can't stand that account. Junk, 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 junk. So much junk. But because I don't clear it out regularly, I am now on 12.3K messages. I don't know where to start to clear out those messages. That is the equivalent of your emotions building up. Eventually, it will cause a crash. So the secure person is able to recognize they have emotions and identify them. Hey, I have emotions. I've got to be real about it. Okay. All right. Number 4 is that they're able to set good boundaries. So that when they can set good boundaries, the secure person is able to say yes or no to things without feeling a sense of guilt or feeling like they're being manipulated. Because when they say yes, they mean yes. When they say no, they mean no. You know what I'm saying to you? So because they're true to themselves, they'll tell you yes and they mean yes. They'll tell you no, they mean no. Because they're okay with they're okay with if the person feels some type of way. It's like, okay, I understand, but as for me, you know, as for me, it's cool. So this is also important. So being able to set good boundaries is a powerful thing. They understand their wants and their needs, and they are okay with putting across their wants and needs. They're not afraid of being abandoned. They're not afraid of being rejected. They're not afraid of being betrayed because they told you what they wanted from you. No, they'll tell you what they feel and do it in a way that also is not dismissive of you. Here's some of the negative sides of a secure person. Unintentionally, they can be complacent because they believe that everybody's secure. And when you're acting out, they struggle to relate with people that are necessarily wounded. Okay, because they're like, that's not how I operate. So sometimes they can struggle with this aspect. All right. Then they can be overlooking emotional struggles of others because, again, they don't struggle in the same way. So they can't identify with you in this particular aspect sometimes. This is why a lot of people don't meet secure people in the dating, because secure people are meeting other secure people. And if you're lucky enough and blessed enough that you meet a secure person, you got to pray you don't sabotage it, right? Oh, they're boring. They're too sturdy. They're too nice, quote, unquote, say, right? And 4th is that they walk away from unhealthy relationships too quickly. Now, that's not necessarily a negative. Walking away from unhealthy relationships is good for you. But what you'll find is sometimes with secure people, they can walk away from those negative relationships or those unhealthy relationships a bit too soon. And when I say a bit too soon, I don't even really mean that. I mean, they will walk at the right time. But if they were to stay a little bit longer, they could help the other person actually grow. But why should they? You know what I'm saying to you? Why should they? They know what they need and know what they want. So next week, we'll look again at these core wounds a little bit more deeper, because of course each individual one has their core wounds, and we'll talk a little bit about those things next week, right? But I hope this has really helped. How is this again impacting relationships? Well, in truth, the reason why it's going to impact your relationship, whether you're in a marriage or whether you're single, whether you're divorced, is because no matter how much you relate to others, you must relate to yourself first. If you are dismissive avoidant, then you are avoidant of yourself first before you're avoidant of other people. If you are fearful avoidant, you are confused within yourself first before you confuse the other person. If you're an anxious person, you are anxious with yourself first before you make other people anxious around you. So to solve the issue and the equation is to solve the equation with yourself first. If you can solve the conundrum within you and begin to heal the inner you, then by all means, you'll be able to grow and be able to help influence your relationship. Your marriage will be blessed. Your relationships will be blessed. Why? Because first and foremost, how you show up, the other person must respond to how you're showing up. Before, you were argumentative. You argued the person down. You then realize, hold on, this is something that I am doing. I am contributing towards the argumentative space. I'm going to choose a different way. I'm getting off the hamster wheel. I'm getting off the cycle. I'm breaking these trauma patterns. And now I'm existing in a different place. Guess what happens? The other person can't argue with you the same way because you're not willing to do it. Oh, we're having communicational issues. You never understand me. Do you understand you? He never understands me. She never understands me. Do you understand you? Because if you did, then maybe you need to recognize that when you show up into a conversation, the reason why they don't understand you is because you don't understand them. It's a vicious cycle. It's a hamster wheel. We're going round and round and round and round. And maybe if you took the time to break the cycle and decided, actually, I'm going to try and understand them first. I'm going to validate them first because that's what I need. And if I can do that for them, then maybe at that point when I do that, they will also have a level of understanding for me too. Because maybe we're just fighting against each other because we're trying to see who's going to understand who first. Do you know what I'm saying to you? Someone's got to break the cycle. That is how relationships and marriages last. Somebody's got to say, it's not going to be me this time. I'm not going to fall into the trap of doing this thing that creates a cycle for us. That makes us go round and round and round. Right? You keep dating people that keep cheating on you. Well, don't look at them. Start looking at you. What is it that I'm doing? What am I doing to me? Now, someone might say that you're not at fault. You're not. You're responsible, though. You're not at fault. You are not at fault for them cheating, but you are responsible. What does that mean? It means you must take responsibility for how you're showing up in that relationship. Do you abandon your needs and your wants? Right? Do you abandon your boundaries because you're trying to keep somebody that doesn't want to be kept? Are you choosing someone because they're a project and you're trying to bob the builder them? Are you somebody who strangles the autonomy of other people? You're controlling. Or maybe you're one of those people that's too loose on it. I don't want to be controlling, so you're completely loose of all your boundaries. Do whatever you want to do. Right? There are many factors here. Now, if you're somebody who's struggling with this is difficult, it's hard to do, right? I want you to understand this is not where you have to stay. This is what we're coaching people in 2025. You're not going to be the same by the end of the year. The people that have coached with me, listen, sometimes I have to work on this too. I need to work on this. I don't like boasting about what I do. I don't like it. I've been taught not to do that, right? But I realize also this is also a trauma response. To not be able to celebrate what you do and celebrate how you make impact in people's lives is a trauma response. That is my dismissive, avoidant self, where I struggle to be able to like, yeah, I've done this, I've done that. I don't like talking about that because it sounds arrogant. But in reality, the reality of the situation is it's a trauma response. I try to downplay myself and small myself. It's a trauma response. So you can see me, I'm a person, when I coach people, I won't lie to you because I haven't got the time, number one. Number two, I don't want to lie to you because I want to make sure that you understand that I'm on this journey with you. I'm not a coach that has it all. I'm not a coach that knows it all. I don't know it all, right? But what I do know is there will be healing. What I do know, there will be growth. What I do know is there will be transformation. And I know that to be fact, and it will happen speedily. Because I don't want to waste time. We're going straight to the root. And I don't want you on my books forever. I can be honest with you that. I want you in and I want you out. Okay? Because the quicker you're in and the quicker you're out, okay, the more people we can serve. All right? So listen, if this is something that has affected you, if this is something that you're going through right now, if this is something that you're dealing with, this is a perfect time. I haven't opened my books completely because I want to open it in April fully. I have a link in my description box here on YouTube. If you're watching from Instagram, then you can go onto my profile and you can click on the link on my profile to go to my coaching links as well there, right? What I'm doing right now is I've opened myself up to a place where I've put an offer on the table. Because really, like I said, I want to help people, right? And the offer on the table is at the moment is that we're doing 5 coaching sessions. You can buy it all up front and it's going to save you up to £125. Okay, because each coaching session on its own is £100. Now, at first, I was scared. I can't lie to you. I didn't want to do it. Okay, I didn't want to make it £100 because let me give you my true feelings. I was scared to put it at £100 because I said, why would someone want to pay that? Till I saw the transformations, till I see people growing, till I see people healing, till I see people actually changing right before my eyes. Right? So if you've coached me, you know. You come in there, we get it, we're nailing it because we want to go straight to the root, right? And this season, what I've done also is I've not just added the coaching, I've done worksheets as well. I want you guys to be able to do homework when you're at home. I want things that you can actually start looking at and start doing as an example to start training yourself. Like I said, I'm here to help you, but I want to get you onto your own 2 feet that you can be able to run by yourself. The object is not to keep you on the books, like so you can keep coming back and just be like, I'm keeping on a loop. No, no, no. The object is get you to a place you're standing on your own 2 feet and you're able to run. That's what we need to get you to. So we're doing worksheets, we've got workbooks, we're doing around attachment styles, around boundaries, your self-worth, developing a voice, talking about self-confidence. We've got worksheets all around those things. And if I haven't got a worksheet for it, if we do a session and something comes up, I create a worksheet. This is the season, baby, because we are not going to stay the same in 2025. I can guarantee you that. Okay? We are not keeping you where you need to be in 2025. If you're looking for change, this is it. This is your signal. All right? This is the moment you said you wanted to change. This is it. Okay? You wanted to see something different in 2025. This is it. Click on the link down below. Sign up. Get yourself involved. We're going to change that. All right? So that was my passionate plea because I want to see people grow. I want to see people heal. I want to see them transform. And shout out to those who were in the chat with me today. I took a risk. And you know what? I can't lie to you. I was scared. Can I be honest with you? Like, usually I link this channel to Little Black Book to supplicate how many people come on. Because sometimes I'm like, we might not get as many people. And I told myself today is a day to not be scared. So I can't tell you to be courageous. And I can't tell you to take a leap of faith. And I can't tell you to be strong and confident and come and join me for coaching when I can't take a risk myself and go past my own fears. Because courage is in the face of fear. Courage isn't when there is no fear. Courage is when there is the fear right in front of you and you bypass it. That is where courage is. All right? That's where bravery is. So, again, listen, I thank everybody who's been on this live. We're going to be back next week, same time. Okay? And we're going to go deeper into attachment styles. We're going to start breaking down each individual attachment style and what comes along with it. And we're going to start really unearthing a lot of these things. I'm doing this so that you can also have it for free. I don't want to charge this aspect. I believe in what we can do in the coaching, but I need to give you stuff for free too. Because we need people to be able to chew and eat and get some meat as well going as well. All right. So again, the link to the coaching is down below in my description box. There's also a link on my profile. If you're on Instagram watching us, it's on my profile. You can click on the link and then it will take you to, I can't remember what it's called, Linktree. And you can book through there. Okay. So we're going to get this going. All right. Or you can email me at littleblackbird91@gmail.com. Okay. You can email me as well. All right. If you want to know a bit more. Okay. So we got to go. I will chop up this video so it's a bit more smaller in smaller chunks. From next week, you'll start seeing videos pop up on this channel. So if you haven't done so already, subscribe. This is LBB91 Coaching. If you haven't subscribed already, subscribe because videos are going to start coming out every week on different attachment styles in smaller chunks. Okay. All right. I appreciate you. Stay locked, stay loaded. We are going to change the world by changing you in 2025. I appreciate all of you who have supported me so far. Let's keep going. All right. I appreciate you. Let's be having you. Appreciate you. Oh.